Kids watching storytelling, their brains firing all over the place because they have to make their own pictures. They have to imagine on a multi-sensory layer. When you're listening to a story, you imagine the smells, as well as the sounds, as well as the feelings. And the child or adult listener is transported by that story. And so their brain fires all over. And I know this is true because I saw it on TV. They had these kids in a room with electrodes in their brain, and it's just fascinating. You know, so it's how you use these left and right hemispheres. Another quote, and I'm not sure the source. I think it might actually be Einstein. Something I learned from another storyteller, Mary Jo Huff. Einstein said that if you want to raise compassionate and wise children, tell them stories. If you want to raise children that are more wise and more compassionate, tell them more stories. Because it's really stories that give us that sense of who we are and our connection to the world and that bigger sense of their place in the world. But on lots of academic levels, and you know, I could go on all day about this because this is really my specialty, storytelling in schools. History. It's really about the story, his story. And what about her story? What about the people often left out of the history book? What about the minorities and the women, you know, the Native Americans, the African Americans, the Asian American stories? It's those stories that really bring everyone into a sense of that timeline and where we are on that timeline. Abraham Lincoln said, "Show me a nation with no sense of history, and I'll show you a nation with no future." If we have a sense of where we've been, we have a better sense of where we're going. And so in the history classroom, I always encourage teachers to put down the book and tell stories. I hated history as a kid. Now I'm a professional historian. I work on a riverboat during the summer, the Spirit of Peoria, and I bring the history of the river to life. I do a lot of work with social studies teachers, and again, the Field Museum and historical societies hire me because it's about the story. The stories connect kids. And if you want to remember the names and dates and the facts, put it in a story. The story's the glue that helps all that to stick. You know, we talked about science and literacy and history, and in art. All great artists are storytellers. And I love, it's very affirming to me, since this is my profession, when I hear that such and such a movie maker, or such and such a visual artist, or such and such a ballerina or choreographer is America's greatest storyteller. Because they're using different mediums to do what I do in the most ancient form, which is to stand up and tell a story. That it's dance. You know, the way we play with an audience is choreographed. It's visual arts, because what we do creates pictures in their minds. You know, it's oral, interpretive, and literary arts, because I love bringing classic literature to life. I do a lot of Mark Twain and Edgar Allan Poe and O. Henry. And if you want to get kids excited about literature and literacy, you tell them stories, because then they'll go and check that book out of the library. Because it's the passion that I share, hopefully that's contagious, that they'll go home and want to learn the story themselves.